Hey everyone, it's Harry. So sorry about last week. I don't know what tripped my mind there, but the good news is that we were supposed to just look at a case study today, so there wasn't too much lecturing going on anyway. So that's good. But I am going to teach you about this um, JSON and fetching data and dynamically updating a website, which is what continues into Web 322. So it's kind of the last part of this that sums it all up. Just so you know, if you pop into Discord, you'll notice I posted a long-winded thing about what's left to do in the course. There's no final in this course, so the assignment 6 kind of rolls into the finals week, but that's kind of intentional. And technically it's due on Friday, but I squeezed as much time as I could out of it for you guys. So it's actually I'm gonna make it due on the 13th. All of our grades have to be in by the 15th, so yeah, make sure you get it in. I can't accept. There's no possible way to get lates on that one. It's not super difficult, at least I think, but you're probably looking at about 6 hours of work. I would gather. Lab 6, test, lab, quiz, whatever we're calling them. Technically, I was supposed to have it last week, but I screwed that up. That's on me. So what I'm gonna do with this one is I'm gonna release lab 6 today. It's not required to do. But if you do it, I'll replace one of your other labs if you get a higher mark on it. So you won't be penalized for not doing it at all. I know everyone's quite busy. So if you think you did the other labs perfectly, um, that's cool. If not, you should do lab 6. Lecture today. So I'm here at the school if you need to meet me, um, send me a message. But I'm recording this video obviously so that you can come back and look at this stuff on your own time. Lab time on Friday. I'm going to be here at the school. And because it's our last class together, I'm not saying you have to come in, but if you want to come in and shoot the crap for a little bit, say goodbye. If you have a grading issue, comments, questions, concerns, either about this semester or last semester, or sorry, this semester or even next semester, let me know. Please come to that class, and happy to talk to you. All right, so let's get started with this. So let's talk about Ajax. So I'm sure you've heard of this terminology before. It stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And we'll just decipher some of these things right now. So, as the internet progressed in the early 2000s, there was this need, or I want, anyway, I'd like to say, that, our websites become more dynamic, more entertaining, like easier to use because the adoption of the internet was quite high, right? So you got to imagine in the late 90s, not everyone had a web browser and all this kind of stuff. So, but the time we got to 2005, um, there was it was just text and images. So, a specific person doesn't matter their name, you can look it up. Invented this way to make HTTP requests from the client browser when something happened on the page. So, for example, if I scroll to the bottom of a web browser page, I can actually use JSON or JavaScript to detect that I'm at the bottom of the page. And then when that happens, I can make an HTTP request to get more data from somewhere else and then fill out the rest of the page. And we do this asynchronously. And that's like why this is, the first part is called asynchronous. And if you don't know what that means, you're going to get more of this later on, not just in web programming, but in all sorts of programming. And a quick thought process on this would be is like you asking someone to do a task for you while you continue to do your own task, right? So imagine you're playing a video game and you want to make a pizza, but instead you call up the pizza place, you order it, you don't pause the game, and eventually the pizza arrives. But in the meantime, you're still playing a video game. Well, the same theory kind of works in programming. You ask the computer or the program to start a task, then you immediately continue with whatever else you were doing. In most cases, you can wait for the task to finish, or you can, pop up a window, whatever. Sometimes, if you're scrolling through Facebook and you don't have a fast internet connection, you get to the bottom of the screen, you'll get like a little loading sign, and this is the async call happening in the background. If that async call didn't happen, your browser would actually just freeze, and the user wouldn't really know that something is loading, right? Because the whole screen would freeze. They're waiting for it to come back. You can't do anything, and this is kind of why this was created. So I think the JavaScript part of this is pretty obvious. It was created in JavaScript so that we could use it in web browsing. But these async tasks, it's all across programming. It's called threading. Anyway, you'll get into that way later. And then it says and XML. So I think you've heard me talk about XML in the past, and XML is kind of an older way to transfer data. And if you've ever seen it, it kind of looks like it's been a long time for me to do XML. But if I wanted to do like an object in XML, it would look something like this, right? And again, I'm not perfect on the syntax, but JavaScript, as you know, does objects kind of like this, right? So person, first name. So what was happening was we would do this async task, get XML from a server, and then convert it into a JSON object. So what happened was basically everyone ditched XML and started using JSON, but Ajax was already a coined phrase, so no, we just never changed um, what Ajax really meant. Different, right? Or like weird. In fact, it XML was actually so popular. It was our calls are actually XML HTTP requests. But people started using this XML HTTP request to call all sorts of other stuff, including JSON. So it's really just referred to as XHR. Not a huge deal to remember these acronyms. You can Google them, but just kind of a history on it. So instead of, talking about it, let's make a simple example. So I just made an index.html file, right? And I'm going to run this in the browser, in a simple npx light server. And it'll be right here. Let's just move this over a little bit. And I'm going to drop in some code that accesses some Bitcoin. Sorry, to accesses values of Bitcoin. So there's a URL and it provides, Bitcoin data. And here's the URL. Right, and it just simply, that's not even JSON, right? I just give you the price of Bitcoin in the last 24 hours, and oh, Bitcoin's that much right now. Interesting. Anyway, so I'm gonna write an HTTP request that grabs the value of Bitcoin and then puts it on the page. So the first thing that I want to do is just have a place that I can put the value of the Bitcoin, and then I'm gonna write our HTTP request. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this from our notes, but I'll describe what's happening. So check this out, and let's zoom this out a little bit. So what's going on is, we create two functions, and then when our script loads, we call the current value function. Current value function will then create an HTTP request. It'll go out to this URL, and this is after our web browser is already loaded, right? So our server isn't doing this. Our client is actually being told, go out and look for this website. If it can access it, then it will read the response from the website, and then this response right here will contain whatever the API gives you. So this API could actually give you, an object, not just, one single value, and then we could convert it into an object in JavaScript, do whatever we want with it. In this case, we just have the response, and then we use our DOM manipulators to update our page. So if we go back to our actual page, you can see it works pretty flawlessly. This is like, it's such a simple example, but it's so important because this is how every web page works, basically, right? So super important, really good example. And there are now tons of different ways to do this XML HTTP request. So you can use jQuery, you can use new types of requests, but this is, at the end of the day, this is exactly what's happening in XML HTTP request. So if you're, this could be a job question as a new developer. They might ask you how, you could pull data from a website or an API. XML HTTP request is the answer. So, this just uses a simple one um, one item call, not an object. But let's just look at what would happen if it was an object. So I'm going to take, a regular JavaScript object and we'll make it look like this. I'll get rid of some of this code. And if you just look at this JavaScript object, pretty simple, right? Like products equals, name, Apple, price, and then it tells you the currency, whatever, right? So this is an object, this is an array because of the square brackets. Pretty simple stuff. And if you wanted to read this object, I could just do console.log products, 0 dot name, right? And this should give me the name Apple inside of the console. Super easy. And we'll learn more about that later. Now, there are built-in functions that will actually take this JSON object and convert it into just JSON. So when I actually send this data over the web, we just send it as a string, not as an actual object. So we can do this because there's a built-in function called stringify. And if we just do var JSON equals JSON.stringify, I can take my products and that's all I have to do is to convert this object into a string. And I can output this to the screen. Let's even try it. If I go over to the document and go to console, right, you can see there's our JSON string. Why I'm telling you this is because we can also unstringify it. Now, it's not called unstringify, but it's called parse. So we can actually parse this string by doing something called json.parse. Surprise. So I can take any JSON string, parse it into an object, products again. And again, the good news is now I could actually call an API that sends me JSON, and all I have to do to get it into a variable is to parse it as a JSON object. So if I had more complicated Bitcoin data, then I could do that. Pretty simple, pretty cool. Now we can actually, if knowing all of this, we could make node programs or again websites or whatever to grab Bitcoin information. We could use X's API to get tweets. It's weird saying X. We could use it for Instagram, whatever we wanted. So it's pretty powerful. And that's like 99% of the web is doing that. So to dive just a little bit deeper, what we're going to do is we're going to call an API that has some JSON and not Bitcoin value this time. We're going to use dog examples because I guess there's like a dog website. If you go to the Web222, you can see. And if I go to this site, you can see that it has a huge amount of JSON data and then stuff inside of it. And we don't want to write the objects or the classes for these. We just want to parse the object, which turns out to be really, really easy. So I'm going to I'm just going to make a JSON function called, load dog breeds, right? And then I'm going to make a variable just for the URL. I'm going to paste in the URL that I had. I think it was, it doesn't matter, I'll paste it in. Right, so we have the URL, and then I'm going to make a new XHR request. And then I'm just going to say, okay, I'd like to call this URL. And when I do that, I want to do stuff inside of that. So when it's finished, I'm going to parse the return value, which will automatically be in something called response. And it should look like this. JSON.parse. And then we're going to get our list. And after I do that, this should actually allow me to see, the actual JSON converted object. Now, a couple things to note. There's some missing things from here. Number one, I'm just making this XHR request, and then I'm setting the parameters that I want it to use when the actual thing happens. But I haven't told it yet what URL to use, right? This is the URL right here. So I actually have to say xhr.open, and I'm going to say use a get request and open up this URL. And that's the first step. And then I'm going to send the data that I want, right? So I'm going to send in the URL request. So now what's going to happen is this function inside of here is an async call. And it's not going to run immediately, right? I'm setting up the things that happen after it runs. So when I actually do this send, it's going to come back here and then run the code inside of here. It's not going to run this first. So check it out. I'm going to save the page and I'll run the code. And actually, I missed something because this is just our function. We're not even running the code. So I actually want to do um, load dog breeds. And in fact, I want to do this after our entire website loads. So we'll do window.onload equals function, and this should set us up. So if I do all of this, did I miss anything? Yeah, I did. I spelled function wrong. There we go. So if I do all of this, what should happen is, it's going to load our entire web page, call the load dog breeds function, and get whatever data is in that URL, convert it to a JSON object, and then just output it to our console.log. Remember, this is client side, so not server side. So I'm going to look over here in our web page, and you can see there might be errors. I don't know if this is just my browser or what, but um, check this out. There's our JSON, right? Message success. And if I click the little down arrow, you should be able to see here's all the data in a perfectly formatted JSON object, right? So before, if we just go back to the data page itself, right here. Ah, what? Oh, I forgot an L. There we go. Right. And now we can play, with anything inside of here, all the data, which is super awesome. So we could make a whole website about dog breeds using this API. I don't know if you wanted to do that. I love dogs, but yeah. So this is the very basis of all of the sites that we've talked or been on in the past. You can go through the notes and check this out. I'm not going to go through how to iterate through arrays in this. That is what Lab 6 is for. So you can actually go in here, and the Lab 6 is going to actually use the dog API, so you don't have to go find any API or anything like this. But I want you to, do some of the work for yourself. But in 10 minutes, that's basically how JSON, or sorry, Ajax works. And it's probably one of the most important concepts to understand, even though it's relatively simple, because why it's important is, every library that is out there now, React, Angular, Ember, Vue, they all use this. Any modern framework uses Ajax. And they might have their own thing that's not called XML HTTP request, but at the end of the day, that's exactly what's happening. So you're taught this like lowest level of how to do the request. Later on, it gets a lot easier. You can actually do a jQuery Ajax request, and really all you need is the URL. But that is for next semester. A couple last things to note: there's always a problem with API calls, and it's due to this thing called cross origin requests. You're going to come across this all the time, and basically it's like an access control policy, meaning one URL cannot call another URL, and this is a default set to no by every web server out there right now because it's a huge, problem. Meaning you could actually take data from one website and make an entire other website that copies that data. So this cross origin policy, or it's called cross origin resource sharing, CORS, CORS, and you might see this if you start calling different APIs. Now, this is why APIs have keys and that user logins and all this kind of stuff. The dog example that I was showing you actually turns CORS off so we can use their API, but 99% of APIs have CORS enabled. So if you do actually want to say make a Bitcoin algorithm that uses Ajax, you might have to add a key and figure out how to send that data before you can access the JSON. Anyway, that's it. There's a couple other newer ways to do this. One's called Fetch API, and that's like in HTML5 and in the latest version of JavaScript. But I'll let you guys play around with that. This is kind of just an intro to all of these awesome things that we're going to do in Web 322. Anyway, have a great day. Um, Please come on Friday if you want to say hey or bye or whatever. Buy me a donut. No, I don't need donuts. All right. See you later.